and welcome to the Lines Podcast. It is the NFL Draft Edition, part dose here. Matt Brown, Stephen Andress coming at you. We did all the offensive positions, offensive thoughts in the previous version of this. You can go and you can find that. There'll be a link in the description down below. If you're just listening to us on the audio side of things, just scroll up. We're in your feed here for all that. But we're going to hit some defensive side of things here, Stephen. And listen, this is a caveat. If you're finding this later in the week, just know these odds are moving. Markets are getting added. There's a market available today that wasn't available yesterday. And there's also, take what we're saying here kind of with a general broad sense of what we're looking for and what we're looking at, but just knowing that some of these odds are just going to run wild. And one of the ones that we certainly know, just because in the last 24 hours has started to change, is just the defensive line, the defensive prop of first defensive player selected in the draft. Will Anderson minus 175, Tyree Wilson now at just plus 150, Jalen Carter all the way down at 9-1. The general thinking here, Stephen, it is going to be Anderson or Wilson, but there are reports out there that there are some teams, the teams have not been named yet, but some of these insiders have said that they have spoken to some teams that actually have Wilson higher on their board than Anderson, given the size difference. And again, we talked about this a little bit with the wide receiver position. Some teams it's just different strokes for different folks, right? Some teams are going to value things a little bit different than others. And you have Tyree Wilson, who comes in at 6'7". He's a good 25 pounds heavier than Will Anderson as well. And some people like that length. Some people like that from a pass rusher. Some people like just the sheer power and production in college that Will Anderson already has on tape and all of that. And it's going to come down to personal preference, but we are starting to see these numbers change.
This is the same exact line of thinking and logic that we saw last year when Aiden Hutchinson was the favorite to be the first defensive player for so long, number one overall pick last year. And it wound up being Trayvon Walker, right? They went with the traits guy and the guy that they thought had more upside as opposed to the guy who's a better finished product right now. So, yeah, I mean, I was all over this a week ago. I think my strategy of kind of sprinkling the board of non-Will Anderson guys is out the window now, because the best price on Tyree Wilson is plus 160. You know, it's a little different when he was plus 300. But right now at this juncture, I think I would take a shot on Tyree Wilson here, because in particular, we're talking about the Houston Texans at number 2. If they don't go quarterback, I still think the smart move is trading the pick, but we don't know if there's a market for that. So if that is the pick, if there is a trade, then it's a quarterback and you're still in the mix for first defensive player drafted. We don't know if the Cardinals have Tyree Wilson over Will Anderson. That's still possible. So I like sprinkling here on the plus money on Tyree Wilson in the event that happens. I think it's a total mystery how teams have these guys stacked. If it is the Texans at number 2, Matt, I'm pretty confident about Tyree Wilson because of the history of one writer in particular, Lance Zierlein, who is well connected to Houston. He was the first one and one of the only ones that had Houston taking Derek Stingley last year with the number 3 overall pick. And he was the first one to come out and put Tyree Wilson to the Texans at number 2. So I like that pattern. I like the relationship he has there. And I think the price is right still at anything plus 150 or more.
Yeah, some of these mock drafts that are coming out really, really recently here, as late as yesterday, it is about split now on Anderson and Wilson as to where guys have them going and which teams they have them going and all of that. So again, this is something that does look like a coin flip type situation. So as Stephen mentioned, I mean, if it's a coin flip, but you're not getting coin flip prices, you're getting plus 150 on one side of things as opposed to the other. That might be a plus EV bet for you if you truly believe, kind of what these mock drafters have out there in the steam that's coming, that this is really more of a coin flip type situation. So we will be, again, keeping our ears to the, our eyes to the Twitter machine and reading every Can I
ask you a follow-up question on this? Yeah. Do you think there's a chance that both the Texans and the Cardinals are able to trade out of their picks and the first 4 picks in this draft are quarterbacks, or the first 3 picks in this draft are quarterbacks? And then you have a team like the Colts that may go defense, but need cornerback more than the front, or we get to the Seahawks who are on the clock at 5 and all the quarterbacks are gone. And maybe they take the chance on the red flag guy, but without the red flags, is thought to be the best defensive player in this draft in Jalen Carter. Any kind of outlier situation there that you can wrap your head around?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm still in this boat, and I know that I'm in the minority here, but I'm still in the boat where I believe that this could go 1, 2, 3, 4 quarterbacks. Like, I still do believe that that is within the realm of possibility here, because listen, if you are the Cardinals, you're going to get one of the 3 best defensive players in the draft, but even if you trade down, and you're going to collect assets along the way, right? And so a team where the cupboard
the worst
is
you're
so
trading
bare,
down to, right? The worst you're trading down to is top 7 with the other teams that won quarterbacks.
And you're going to get either Wilson, Anderson, or Carter, as you just mentioned, if you're down at 7. So like, you're going to get one of the 3 best defensive players in the draft. Even if you trade down, the cupboard is so bare that, like, even if you're only adding an extra second rounder or something or whatever, like getting a second rounders contribute, man. Like, second rounders are good players in the NFL and all that. So I don't know. Again, I don't work in a front office. I can only say what I think I would do. But if I was looking at that roster of the Cardinals and realizing I'm going to be without my starting quarterback for the first X amount of games of the season, who knows how many games that's actually going to be before Kyler Murray's out there, you really know that this is a dead season anyway. Why wouldn't you just accumulate assets? Why wouldn't you try to build for a year from now? So that's just still my thinking here. And I know nobody thinks that they're going to trade out, and everyone at this point, the thinking is they're going to stay. But again, I still think just picking up an extra 2 is big for them. I think, getting an extra good body, a good young body, a cheap body, I might add as well, because these rookies, the contracts aren't near as much. So that's my line of thinking. So I think 1, 2, 3, 4 is still well within play.
Yeah, I agree. And if that chaos unfolds with the quarterbacks at the top, that goes back to my strategy I employed about a week ago. I think you can still employ some kind of variation of that strategy where you're just sprinkling a couple of units on non-Will Anderson guys here, getting good prices on Tyree Wilson, Jalen Carter, Devin Witherspoon, and Christian Gonzalez, because all the talk has been about how the Texans rank these defensive players. 0% of the talk has been how these other teams rank these defensive players. So it may be worth kind of just spraying the board here a little bit and hoping one of these long shots come home.
So good little transition there into the cornerback market. And in the cornerback market, as we take a look right now, Devin Witherspoon is your favorite to be the first cornerback off of the board. Christian Gonzalez is the second. It's going to be one of those 2 guys. Listen, Joey Porter Jr. is good, and he's going to go in the first round, but nobody is considering him over Witherspoon or Gonzalez. And so it will be Witherspoon or Gonzalez. And if you truly believe it's a coin flip situation, just like we were talking about on the defensive line, then Witherspoon at -210 and Gonzalez at +170. The bet to make is Gonzalez at 170. I can tell you this from the mock drafts that, again, have been coming out in the last 2 days of the guys that I follow, the guys that I respect. What we do have is a pretty decent little split of Witherspoon and Gonzalez. Now, it does lean Witherspoon pretty heavily as far as guys thinking Witherspoon goes at 6 or 7. And that Gonzalez kind of goes to that next cornerback slot, which we're looking at, which is more like at 12. But there are some guys that have that flip-flopped where it is Gonzalez going at 6 or 7, and then Witherspoon going down at that 12 slot, where a lot of people think that a cornerback is going to go. So I don't know if this one's quite as much of a coin flip as it is with Wilson and Anderson, because again, there's just a team. There's so much of a preference when it comes to just what type of player you're looking for with Wilson and Anderson. I think the general consensus here, Stephen, Witherspoon and Gonzalez are both going to be studs. They're fairly similar from a player profile standpoint and all of that. And so I don't know if this is as big of a coin flip really when it comes down to it. I think there's just going to be Team X has always just liked Witherspoon a little bit better, and so that's just all it's going to be. Team Y has just always liked Gonzalez a little bit better, and no matter what tape they watch, or no matter, they're just not going to change their opinion. It's not like we want the 6'7" dude over the 6'3" guy, or we want the 277-pound guy over the 253-pound guy. I think it's just kind of like, we watch the Witherspoon the most, we like him. We watch Gonzalez the most, we like him.
The only kind of connection of some smoke here that I've seen is that the Colts may like Christian Gonzalez more than Devin Witherspoon, but that doesn't matter if, in my opinion, CJ Stroud or Will Levis is available to them at number 4.
Mm-hmm.
The only way I think the Colts consider a corner here, because they did lose Stephon Gilmore and it is a need, and they are pretty solid in the front 7. They need to have both of their 2 quarterbacks off the board for them to consider this and then figure out a plan B at quarterback. So it's an outlier situation. We don't know what the other teams think. I can tell you that, the grading systems are split on this as well. Lance Zierlein has Gonzalez graded higher than Witherspoon. Daniel Jeremiah has Witherspoon graded higher than Gonzalez. So outside even the mock drafts, Matt, the player graders that are out there are also split on these 2 guys. And it's just, a matter of preference on what type of cornerback you want. Christian Gonzalez is 6'1", 197. He's bigger. He's physical, better for press coverage. Devin Witherspoon is 5'11 and a half, 181. A little more speedy, a little more rangy, can, make up some ground if he gets behind a receiver. So it's tough to say, but yeah, I wouldn't be mad at anybody for taking the better odds here, considering the unknown that we have.
Yeah, and I think you can make a correlated play here, and it's almost like a parlay. Like if you're dead set that Witherspoon's going to go first, then you can bet Gonzalez to go second. Or if you're dead set that Gonzalez is going to go first, then you can bet Witherspoon to go second. Again, there is not a single mock draft out there, Stephen, that I respect that does not have those guys as the first 2 corners off the board. Like there's not a single one out there of guys that I respect that doesn't go in that order. And so with that, I think you can kind of make a correlated bet, if you will, as to how this is going to all play out. And if you're right, then you're making some
Do you think either of them have a chance to be a top 5 pick?
I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, but I keep going back to what we were just talking about a second ago. Like I'm
you
still
can bet
of the
one at
mindset
20 to 1
that we're going to get. I'm still of the mindset that we're going to get at least 3 quarterbacks in the first 4 picks, if not 4 quarterbacks in the first 4 picks. And so that just, to me, has it,
kind of closes the
there's just
narrow...
no outs for me there. Yeah. Right. I do think what is very, very live is either one of these guys going 6 to the Lions. Right. Like, okay. I think that is very, very live. And if the Lions to take a corner is, as a bet. And if you don't, that way you don't have to pick between one of the 2 guys. You can just kind of take the Lions as a team to pick a corner, because if you look at the Lions and, notwithstanding the information that we got this morning about them being without one of their star players for the first 6 games of the year, as we mentioned, on the offensive side of the ball, the Lions are pretty stacked, right? I mean, they're pretty good when it comes to the offensive side of things. And if they're going to add in this draft early on, it's going to be an impact defensive player. And I think with today's modern NFL, right, you already went and got Aiden Hutchinson last year. So pass rusher taken care of. The next logical thing, right, is pass defender. And so I think a corner at 6 for this Lions team is very, very likely. And you could just kind of bet that as opposed to betting either, Witherspoon, either Witherspoon or Gonzalez here.
Yeah, I mean, Witherspoon's not on the board for odds to be a top 10 pick. Gonzalez is minus 175. I think it's probably a fair price. Mm-hmm. And even the odds, if you wanted to take a shot on either of them to be a top 5 pick, have shortened considerably in recent weeks. I actually took a little bit of a shot on Gonzalez with that Colts connection and the type of corner that they like a couple of weeks ago, and it was 30 to 1, and now you're only getting 10 to 1 for Gonzalez to be a top 5 pick. That's not worth it to me. So I think that ship has sailed. And I guess in summary, the only thing I'd be willing to bet at this point is Gonzalez minus 175 to be a top 10 pick, or the plus money to be picked ahead of Witherspoon.
Right. It's an interesting market for sure. And certainly with, kind of the million different ways to bet all of this. Like we said, we've already run through 4 different ways that you can kind of bet things if you don't want to, find yourself in a position where you have to bet like a specific thing. You can also bet just kind of a broader bet. So there's a lot of those things that are going on as well. Linebacker props. This one is very close to a coin flip. First linebacker off the board, either Jack Campbell or Drew Sanders. That is really the consensus here. Trenton Simpson is not that far off either at plus 380. Campbell's minus 115. Sanders is sitting plus 130. So this is one of the ones that's a little bit closer, Stephen, than we have that we have seen, right? Is just looking at the linebacker situation and which way that this could play out. Do you have any sort of feeling here on this one?
I don't. When you get into linebackers at this point, you're really talking back half of the first round at best. And with what we know about this NFL draft, where the consensus is there's really only 15 blue chip players, I haven't seen anybody that said one of these linebackers is one of those 15 guys. So, now we're in a situation where maybe there's one linebacker that goes in the first round. Wouldn't be surprised if there's less than, I'd be shocked if there's 3 linebackers that go in the first round. I'd kind of be surprised if 2 go in the first round. So
I don't know if there's going to be one.
I'm with you, honestly. That wouldn't surprise me one bit.
So, I don't know if there's going to be one, because I think what we've gotten to at this point especially towards the back half of the, so none of these guys are like first half of the first round type players anyway. And then once we get to that back half of the first round, Steven's kind of like, we get to those teams, as we mentioned, that either some of them have either luxury picks or some of them have like dire needs at a certain position. And I just don't see a ton of these teams really looking and getting at one of these linebackers, right? I mean, like you look at the Chiefs, if any of those offensive linemen that you and I were talking about, are still available, I think that is really interesting, for the Chiefs when it comes to all of that. I mean, I just don't know if a linebacker, I mean, we know that the Bills probably want to add a wide receiver, there's just a lot to me that points to maybe this linebacker deal could just fall into the second round.
For what it's worth, Daniel Jeremiah moved Drew Sanders out of his top 50. He had him at number 44, and now he's completely out of the top 50, and he has Jack Campbell barely in the top 50 at exactly number 50. Lance Zierlein has Drew Sanders at slightly better rating than Jack Campbell. So those two are split on that. Yep. So like, what do you want to bet on?
Well,
right.
And I look at it this way. So again, of the mock drafts that I follow that I consider to be guys that are pretty sharp and have had some success in doing this over the years, quite literally 0% of them have a linebacker going until the Bills, and only like 10% of the ones that I follow have a linebacker going to the Bills, and then that's it, right? Like no one's mocked one to the Saints or the Eagles or the Chiefs after that. It's kind of like almost like a 1-out bet if you believe what these guys that are doing these mock drafts believe. Like it is 0% have any linebacker going except to the Bills, and there's only a handful of guys that have a linebacker going to the Bills. So I think that's a pretty strong indication of kind of what we're looking at here at the linebacker position. Almost one where I'm like, you know what, I'm okay just kind of glancing past this thing.
One guy that I do trust with mock drafts, he's been one of the 5 most accurate mock drafters in recent years. Ryan McChrystal does have something interesting for his first linebacker. He doesn't have either of these guys, actually. He has Trenton Simpson. For first linebacker, and he's at like plus 380 at FanDuel. So the market is completely divided on what to do with this situation. And once we get into the second round, that's when teams start maybe prioritizing need over their board strictly by player grade. So it's a crapshoot.
Yeah, I don't like that market really at all. And so we'll kind of move on past that one. So there are some other interesting markets that are out there outside of, we've hit the defensive positions here, but some of the other ones that are available out there are top, we talked about this, the positional totals in this thing, how many X type of players are going to go in the first round, et cetera, et cetera. If you take a look, the defensive players overall, Stephen, are sitting here at 14.5. as far as defensive players overall. I tend to lean a little bit. I think it's a dead on number, right? Like from what I've looked at and what I've seen, I think it's a dead on number. Not really one that I'm like looking a ton to kind of bet on here, but I do think the defensive backs drafted sitting at 5.5. I do think the over on 5.5 is pretty interesting because of course safeties count, as defensive backs in this. And so I do think that there's probably going to be 6 taken in the first round from kind of what I have been gathering. But again, this draft, man, you and I talked about this when we wrapped yesterday. I have had far more confidence in the last 3 drafts than I've had in this draft as to kind of how things are going to play out and kind of where players are going to go and team needs and where they might head with things. And there's a lot of teams with luxury picks this year that, they're pretty solid on both sides of the ball. So they could really just going to go anywhere. And I just don't have a super firm grasp on towards the back end of the first round. I think it gets super nutty.
I feel when it comes to like total defensive players or total offensive players, I feel if I'm going to bet one of those, I feel like I'd be most confident in the over. You said it was 14.5 on defensive players.
Yeah.
I feel like you'd be most confident over 14.5 on defensive players just by, let's just do some quick math here on the offensive players that we think are going to be drafted in the first round. 4 quarterbacks for sure, right? Are you of the opinion that Gibbs gets into the first round among running backs? Or are you not sure about that?
I am not, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility strictly because of what we were talking about with these teams and kind of like
weapons
and kind of like what they have. Yeah. Just what they're able to do. Right. I mean, like, does Eckler force his way out of LA and the Chargers then all of a sudden need a running back, right? Like, I mean, so then that could change things, right? Like that could change the way we view things. Do the Cowboys know for sure that Pollard is not going to be ready for the season? We know they don't like Zeke's gone. So like, do they then at that point, try to go after one of these guys?
Also on a 1-year deal.
Yeah. There are some teams out there where I think it is a kind of a wild card type deal for them to take a running back, that's a non-Bijan Robinson, I should say, running back,
So if 2 running backs go in the first round, maybe we say only 4 wide receivers go in the first round. Is that fair?
I think that there's 5 because we know 4 for sure. Like, I think we know 4 for sure in Smith and Jigba, Flowers, Addison, and Johnson. That's it. Johnson has been kind of falling a little bit in a lot of these mocks. But like I was saying, like, so then that just leaves it open to, does Hyatt slip into the first round at some point? Does any of these other wide receivers slip into the first round? I think we're definite on 3, 4 likely, and then 5 is like not out of the realm of possibility.
Okay. And let's say worst case scenario, only 2 tight ends go in the first round.
Yeah.
Even though I do like Darnell Washington to get in there. Mm-hmm. And then you're on the under 5.5 offensive lineman, right?
It seems to me, if I'm looking at kind of how because, look, I do a very unofficial, I'm an idiot mock draft, right? Like one that I understand that like I have no business doing a mock draft. So currently I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I actually have 5 offensive linemen going.
Yeah, that's fair. That jives with your under 5.5.
Yeah,
that you talked about in the other pod.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we're right on the bubble here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if it's
and I have, and here's the worst part. So I have 5, but then I have like written to the side, like I actually kind of have 5.5 because I think that's like I think Osiris Torrance is like this really kind of like borderline first rounder guy that somebody might look at and say, you know what, as opposed to taking the X best corner or the X best wide out, like let's just take an offensive lineman we can plug in and play from day one and just kind of like move on from there. So I think 5.5 is just kind of dead on with that number.
All right. Well, we've added that up. We've gone through the exercise, and we were a little split on a couple positions, but we hit on the under there for defensive players.
Like
But
Cincinnati's taking a
right
tight end
there
for sure, right? Like that just makes too much sense.
Yeah, they did sign one in the offseason, but not exactly reliable. It does make sense. I mean, that's kind of where people have Darnell Washington maybe going as the third tight end in the first round. But I guess we've gone through this little elementary math exercise on adding up position totals for offense and don't really have a firm conclusion on betting over under on these positions because the back half of the first round is such a crapshoot, right? I think we could both kind of, especially this year more than others, I think we can kind of agree on that.
Yeah, I did want to say this top 31 market. The only one that I do think is interesting is what I did mention was if we do get to that fifth receiver, it's likely to be Jalen Hyatt, and he is plus 250 to go in the first round. I think that is at least semi interesting, and there might be some people who actually
one, right?
What's that?
The one with the speed of the group of wide receivers in consideration in this draft. He's the fastest one,
yes,
right?
He's the take the top off guy.
Yeah.
And from what we're getting with Quentin Johnson kind of slipping, like starting to slip a little bit in all of this, I do wonder if that fourth wide receiver could end up being Hyatt. And if that was the case, then he kind of slips in somewhere in the first round as well. I like Hyatt at plus 250 to go inside the top 31 because, as you mentioned, he's just a little bit different from all these other dudes that are available, and there might be a team that finds a lot of value in that.
Okay. Have you the other thing I wanted to talk about here is if you've tied any teams to a position because you like the odds for that team to draft that position.
I just mentioned Cincinnati and a tight end. For me, Cincinnati and a tight end just seems too obvious to me. Cincinnati and a tight end seems too obvious. And then the other one that seems really fairly obvious to me would be defensive line or wide receiver to the Chiefs. Like, I think the Chiefs at the end are going to have the option of getting one of those like defensive linemen or one of those wide receivers that we've just talked about that just kind of is still lingering there. And I think one of those two positions that go into the Chiefs, because like the Chiefs, again, like Patrick Mahomes is still going to need weapons, right? I mean, like they're still going to have to give him stuff to work with and play with and all of that. And like, let's say a Flowers or a Hyatt is sitting there and they, last pick of the draft, Stephen, do you not want to give Patrick Mahomes one of those guys? Like, do you not want to get that fifth year on those guys, if they end up being a complete stud and all of that? Like, I just look at that, and you've invested $500 million in Patrick Mahomes. You have to continue to feed him weapons. And it
means you can't pay wide receivers on their second contract if they do well. So that extra year of control and potentially a sixth year on the franchise tag is a big deal for the Chiefs on a contract like that.
Yeah. So that is another one of the ones where I have kind of started to lean a little bit towards, maybe them also getting a wide receiver that one. So I
bet Chiefs plus 200 for a wide receiver. That's what I bet.
Yeah. I think that one's fairly interesting as well. Outside of that, man, it's been a little bit more confusing, I think, for me, than a lot. I mean, conventional wisdom, the Chargers should take a wide receiver. They need one badly because what Keenan Allen and Mike Williams do, it's fine. And that's great and all for Herbert. But a guy with a cannon like he has, and also like for him to be in the bottom 8 in the NFL, as far as average depth of target and average reception, like they got to have somebody they can throw the ball to down the field. And they don't have that. And so it seems it seems obvious to me as a guy that doesn't, who's not making the decisions, that they would want to do that. And again, give their young quarterback like what he needs to actually be able to maximize his full potential. But that is also where at least I've been looking is Chargers kind of wide receiver as well.
Yep, that's fair. I'll give you one on the defensive side here. We talked a little bit. I know you thought maybe the Eagles would be a landing spot for Bijan Robinson when we recorded.
Mhm.
And then ironically, Daniel Jeremiah goes on NFL Live on Thursday night and says after working for 2 years in the Eagles front office, he thinks there's a less than 0% chance that Howie Roseman and company will spend an early first round pick on a running back because it's just completely against their
His
philosophy and
philosophy.
positional value, all that stuff. So if we can rule that out, the Eagles right now are minus 160, minus 170 to draft an offensive lineman. They already have their left tackle Mailata. Jason Kelsey's back. They've drafted a couple guys to be the heir apparent to Kelsey potentially at center. Lane Johnson, he plays right tackle. You can find one of those maybe with their later pick.
Yeah.
And if you look at how the top 10 stacks up in terms of grading systems and player grades, I think we would both agree that the defensive players in the top 10 are being graded far higher than the offensive linemen when there isn't a true left tackle in this draft.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, getting plus 180 on the Eagles to take defensive line or edge really kind of matches up with what we know about Howie Roseman's philosophy and the strength of the players available in the top 10 as well in this draft.
Yeah, it would. You would almost you would want to believe that they would go pass rusher, right? Like in that.
They also lost a lot on the front, right?
Right.
In this offseason.
Yeah, you would like to believe that they would go pass rusher too, and if you're getting plus money on that, right? I mean, so that seems like a pretty good spot too. And again, the likelihood of that increases even more if the Cardinals do trade out of the 3 spot, because then now you would, in theory, you're getting one of those guys to fall down and, et cetera, et cetera. So something certainly to think about there. Stephen, let me just go through the bets that I do have in my account, just so that we can kind of go through everything. I have Will Levis under 7.5. That number came out, and that number was just a bad number. Like, Levis is not getting past 7. So I have Levis under 7.5. I have the over on Jackson Smith and Jigba as 11.5. And now listen, I'm willing to lose that one, and I think that I could definitely lose that one. But the reason I bet the over on that, Steve, is because we talk about outs all the time, right? And like, there are just very few outs for him to go under the 11.5, and a whole lot of outs for him to go, over the 11.5. And so I have the over on 11.5 on him. Willing to lose that one should he be the first receiver off the board, and should one of the teams take him, super high. But it's like there's just not a lot of landing spots for him in those first 11 picks, and so that's why I just kind of bet the odds there that I don't think there's very many outs for him to go there. I also have the first round stuff where we're sitting right now. We've talked about this on the pod yesterday, but I want to bring this back up if you're just now landing on this one. There is no shame, again, in if you have a fat Bryce Young ticket, if you just want to put a couple of bucks on one of these other quarterbacks or something like that in case just the craziest thing in the world happens. We're just trying to make money on the draft. We're not trying to be right. Like, it's not like we get to like do a victory lap when everybody like, I only had one bet and it cashed or whatever. It's like, no, man, if you have 3 bets, but you still make a lot of money off of the 3 bets that you have in the same, it doesn't matter. Like, we're just trying to make money here. And so there's no shame, Stephen, in going in and just ensuring that you're going to take home a profit in all of this. And so, for me, I had some big off-season tickets. I talk about this strategy all year long on all of the various content that we do here. So if you don't know what I do, I'll do it again this year too. I find longer shot quarterbacks, because quarterbacks are the only guys that can just rocket up come from absolutely nowhere and end up going number 1 overall in a draft. And and you're saying like, what are you talking about? That's not true. You don't even have to go back that far. Like, Joe Burrow is like the number 1 example, and that was only 3 years ago. Like, Joe Burrow was a late 2nd round to early 3rd round guy who rocketed up to be the number 1 overall pick in the draft. Like, quarterbacks can do that. And so I had a Will Levis offseason ticket at 4-1. I had an Anthony Richardson offseason ticket, which ended up getting worse over the course, but I didn't know that. I had him 30-1. That it got as high as 90-1 for Anthony Richardson, but it is what it is. I have a Hendon Hooker ticket at 100-1 to go number 1 overall. So I took like 3 long shot quarterbacks, and whatever. And so I worked a way now to where I had a good way to get plus money basically on every single quarterback to go number one overall. So I'm going to make money no matter what on that number one pick. And I don't care that I have 5 tickets to get there because I'm still going to make money off the number one pick, Stephen. And so like, it's not like a badge of honor that you only had one bet at a position and that's how you cashed. Just make money, like just put yourself in a position to make money.
Yeah. This is not like a game where you're using a large sample of previous outcomes to try and make a good bet. Like, we don't know basically anything about a lot of this stuff. So
one GM could wake up tomorrow and decide, like, you know what? I like that guy better.
Or an owner can be like, I don't care about your front office's work for the past 364 days. We're taking him.
I signed the checks, like that's what it comes down to. So again, yes, it's like, it's not about being right. It's about making money in this. Right. And so just put yourself in the best position. What do you have in your account like right now as we sit, and we can just kind of go from there?
Yeah, I'm going to rattle through these. I mentioned my strategy for the first defensive player drafted. If you just skip to here, go back in the pod and listen to that. I literally have my apps open. I'm just scrolling through here. So let's just rapid fire this. 2 bets on the Giants first position drafted, wide receiver plus 200 and offensive line plus 380. They're a mess at both of those positions, despite being a playoff team last year, and they need help up front there. So I think they go offense over defense with Dable as the head coach. Mentioned Eagles D-line or edge to be the first position they pick, plus 180. I took the Raiders plus 250 to take a quarterback because they've already been connected to maybe trading up to get the number 1 overall pick. I don't rule them out from being in the market to get the number 2 or 3 pick.
And if you believe this whole Stroud fall thing, then that puts them in prime position to get one as well. So I love that bet.
I think there's a lot of outs there. I took a bet on the Cowboys first position drafted at wide receiver because they've literally hosted like 6 of them. 6 of these guys that could be falling towards the bottom of the first round. I'm with you on total offensive linemen drafted under 5.5. Mm-hmm. I am sprinkling some long shots on team to draft Anthony Richardson, including going as far down the board as the Washington Commanders at plus 3,500 because Ron Rivera is the head coach, and I can see him maybe thinking I can turn this guy into the next Cam Newton. Mm-hmm. And they have a pretty good roster, and they may never get back into the top 5 to draft a quarterback anytime soon. So I could see that possibly happening. The other 2 teams I took a shot on with Anthony Richardson were the Raiders and the Lions, under, again, the theory potentially that they don't see Goff as the quarterback of the future. And I think Richardson's the most likely guy that they could be in play for to take a shot there. What else we got here? We have running backs over 1.5 at, I think, plus 380. I think it's still plus 350 if you want to bet on that. Switch over to the other app here. We mentioned offensive linemen. I think it's Paris Johnson. I'm taking a stand against Skoronski because I think a lot of teams see him as a guard. I can't see a guard being the first offensive lineman drafted. So bet on Paris Johnson and sacrifice some potential profit to take Broderick Jones at 14-1 to maybe hit a long shot there for first offensive lineman drafted. Mentioned on the last show, Bijan Robinson under 12.5. I think most teams have him graded overall as one of the top 5 players in this draft. So maybe a team sticks to their board regardless of his position. I think this is a pretty unusually good tight end class. I do have Kincaid as the first tight end drafted, but that was bet before the red flags came out about potentially him not working out and his weight dropping. So if you want something else, maybe Darnell Washington, even money to be the first tight end drafted.
I want to add to the tight end discussion there. We highlighted this yesterday, but DraftKings posted the tight ends at 2. And we know there's going to be 2 no matter what. So you're basically, and it depends on your bankroll, and I get it, and it's not worth it to a lot of people, but it's like minus 400 on the over 2, but you're basically betting a push no matter what. And if somebody gets wacky and takes, the third tight end in the first round, then it's a winner. Like there's very, 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 like there's 0 mock drafts that I respect that don't have both Mayer and Kincaid going in the first round, right? Like every single one of them have both of those guys going in the first round. So that is a bet I think that is at least available out there that I'm not going to call free money. If it happens to go over, stranger things have happened for sure, and it's not for every bankroll, but it's most likely you're betting a push, and then the only thing that could happen is something good, and somebody takes a third tight end in the first round.
Last one in my NFL draft betting card. Yesterday, I did bet Will Levis at plus money to be drafted by the Indianapolis Colts. There's been more and more reporting on the Colts being connected to Will Levis, going as deep as getting insight from Peyton Manning. And I know from working for that organization that Jim Irsay does get himself involved in the draft process, especially when it comes to drafting a quarterback. He is, I mean, you just saw him draft one of his old players off the street to be the head coach. He cares about what his players from that Super Bowl winning team think. And when it comes to quarterbacks, I can guarantee you he has asked Peyton Manning's opinion about this quarterback class. Will Levis was a Manning quarterback camp product. He's got a history there. And we know that they have gone on the road to go work him out as well as CJ Stroud. So with all of that being said, I don't see the Colts giving up assets to trade up in this draft if they're comfortable with Will Levis. And I think if they don't trade up, then Will Levis is probably going to be their most likely option there. So that's kind of how I feel about that.
The other thing is, if you guys are just getting into this, there are ways that you can make the same bet and get better odds. So for example, in this, the quarterback total is set at 4.5. And currently at 4.5, it's minus 115 on each side. Well, Hendon Hooker would be the fifth quarterback. Like, that is how this would all go down. And so if Hendon Hooker goes in the first round, it's even money. So you actually would just bet Hendon Hooker to go in the first round as opposed to over 4.5 quarterbacks. And so again, just little things like that you can go in and make the same bet. And with the same bet, you are maybe can get some more advantageous odds. So just be sure and shop around with all that as well. I also do have over 3.5 wide receivers. I should put that in there. I just feel very, very strongly that we have 3 going no matter what. Like, that we for sure have Smith and Jigba, Flowers, and Addison that are going to go. And then, all I need then at that point is Johnson or Hyatt to slip into the first round. And, again, there are wide receiver needy teams that are out there. And I think that could possibly go down as well. Guys, this has been an awesome draft season. We will have more content up next week on this draft as well as more information comes out. But start digging around, look around before you make a bet. See if there's a way to make the same bet with better odds in just a different format, and do all of your homework here. And of course, head over to thelines.com and take in all of the great work that's going on over there. For Stephen, I'm Matt. Good luck on all your draft bets.